Thank you to OVF for having this. The event of bringing folks together from the policy field, the election officials, the federal, state, and local government folks really is important on this issue. I think the MOVE Act and its passage is really a testament and answers the question that Secretary Ritchie asked earlier. Thank you to whoever made the MOVE Act possible. Well, who did make the MOVE Act possible? Most of the folks are sitting here in this room. It would not have been possible and not have been able to be done within a period of 4 to 5 months without the extremely hard work, starting with the hearing that we had in March, the first hearing that Senator Schumer, as chair of Rules, wanted to focus on military voters. We had Pat Holleran testify in that hearing. We had Bob Kerrey, pre-FVAP, testify at that hearing. We had Don Palmer of Florida. We had Eric Eversole, formerly of DOJ. And perhaps most moving, we had someone that was an active duty service member, Lieutenant Colonel Joseph DeCaro, who Pat actually had known and worked with in Okaloosa County. He didn't get permission to attend this event officially, so he was not able to appear in his uniform, but he flew out to the Senate to talk about his difficulties and his experiences voting. I'm talking about a little bit of the history here because it's really important to understand what the history of the MOVE Act is, to understand where we are now and where we will go in the future. As you know, Senator Schumer worked very hard with his partners on this, Senator Chambliss, Nelson, Bennett, and Cornyn in the Senate. And then on the House side, we would not have been able to get this done without Representatives Brady, Lofgren, Lundgren, and McCarthy really working hard to make sure that this happens. The issue with members and their involvement in legislation is once they get a bill done, they don't forget about it. They care about it. They treat it as if the policy areas that is covered in the bill is sort of their own baby. You know, I mean, they invested it. They forced it through the Senate, the House, and got the president to sign it, and they really care about it. And to the staffs that work on these issues, it's really important to know that this was a truly bipartisan effort, and the work of OVF and Pew and all the groups did. So to answer Secretary Ritchie's comments, everyone in this room in some way played a part in getting this done and making sure it was a balanced bill and it was something that was workable. That was sort of the easy part, obviously, passing the bill. And as we've heard, and we've heard from Claire this morning, the difficulty is in the enforcement. And to make sure that as much as we can get the statutory language on the federal level drilled down and implemented in the states based on their own state laws and their own state interpretations, and protect these military and overseas voters. We heard from Claire, as I mentioned, on the specific provisions that were required in the MOVE Act. I'm not going to go through those provisions. It would take too long. But the principles that we should be thinking about in better implementation of the MOVE Act are the following. First, we need to ensure that we utilize technology better in reaching these military and overseas voters. Whatever the technical issues and the problems and the great debates that we can have about transmission of ballots, return voted ballots, we need to figure out reasonable, secure ways to reach out and get these ballots to the military folks and find them a way to get the ballots back in a reasonable and secure fashion. Second, even if a military or overseas voter does not have access to internet or some sort of electronic transmission, there needs to be enough time for them to vote. That's the reason for the 45-day requirement. It's the reason for the nuanced, albeit perhaps difficult, waiver process. We cannot assume that everyone and every place has access to military and overseas voting, electronic transmission of ballots. Third, we need to consider ways to remove antiquated provisions in certain state laws that negatively impact these folks from voting. We put in provisions there that that said that states could not refuse to accept ballots that were returned without a notary signature because the paperweight was a different quality than what was required under state law, or that the envelope was on the wrong side. Now, I heard from Claire this morning some news that states were indeed asking it, but and that might have an impact on voters. And these are things that the policymakers on the state and local level need to really consider. They're following the technical letter of the law, but how do we make sure that the spirit is followed? Finally, as far as the intent of the law, there was a concern, and it was raised by Lieutenant Colonel Joseph DeCaro, that these votes are not being counted. You see the statistics about votes out, votes are not returned. And that was the key reason that we included the provision. It was a lesser-known provision, the online free access reporting requirement that basically military and overseas voters could go online or call a number and see if their ballot had been received by the local election office. Basically, so these folks are similarly situated to domestic absentee voters. The comments from DeCaro was, listen, I don't know how all this works. I don't get it. I get the ballot. I try to send it back. I don't have faith that it's being counted. And that provision, while a relatively small provision, and something that we've received concerns as to whether or not it was implemented as well as it could be, is something that is of importance to the military and overseas folks, and something that we need to really consider how it is being done on the state and local level. So the 2010 election passed. We had to, in many states, rush implementation. We now, in many cases, have a little bit of a breather, aside from some recent special elections that were recently implicated as late as yesterday in some states. How do we move forward? I think that we need to understand the actual data from both the EAC, from what FAP is pulling together, from what OVF has done, before we recommend any further changes to federal law. We also have the good work that the Uniform Law Commission is doing as far as how they balance the relationship between the federal move requirements, what they're recommending that states do regarding the protection of state voters for state or local candidates. And they'll be approaching and working with state legislatures to try to figure out a way to balance that. These things need to be done based on real data, real reflection, and to give folks enough time to fully implement the legislation. We realized that there was not a lot of time between the end of 2009 and the 2010 federal elections, but the Congress was not willing to let this problem go unanswered until basically the 2012 election, so that the deadline did have to be moved up. So what is there for Congress to do? We look. We examine what's going on in the states. We follow enforcement by the Department of Justice. I was very glad to hear Assistant Attorney General Perez talk about their outreach. We were in close communication with their offices as well as FAP, as well as the states when necessary, to try to figure out ways to get the law implemented and as true to the intent of all of the co-sponsors and sponsors of the bill as possible. The future that we have to look at is basically this. How can we pass, how did the states determine to pass clear, concise legislation that gives the locals the information they need to implement these laws? A lot of work is now done in a hybrid approach where states are submitting downloadable ballots, but locals are then counting them. How do we make this be completed in a manner that is adequate, accessible, usable for these local election officials, and in a way that they can get this done? I think that we will need to continue to work with the Department of Defense. They've done an amazing amount of work in the last year and a half of getting their responsibilities under the bill done and passed. I was actually heartened, and not to steal Bob Carrier or anyone from FAP's thunder, but this morning there was an article from the Shriver Air Force Base in Colorado that one of the provisions that was included in the original MOVE Act but taken out in conference, that the Air Force Army and Air Force and Marine bases around the world will now have voter registration facilities that will be set up in their bases to ensure that both active duty members, their families, contractors, and people who have business being on base can get registered to vote and have their registrations be submitted to the state. Those types of developments and that improvement, and the fact that finally we're getting some word from actual states that voter registration offices are up and running, that all of the new technology that was basically distributed in a rather quick fashion in the 2010 election now has a little bit of time, and we can be able to reflect on what were the successes, what were the failures. We have a little bit of time to reflect, to look at the requirements, to see how states want to implicate the Uniform Law Commission's recommendations, and we really want to hear from you. I'll end early under the Caesar rule that we've had, but I do want to hear questions. If people have problems in their states, if they have problems with implementation, please let us know. I'm happy to give out my email address. Susan has it, Chip has it. We want to be partners on this, and we do thank you all because, again, so many. I'm looking out in the room. So many folks had a hand to play on this, and we think the debate has been great, and the results as a first step have been pretty impressive. So thank you.